I want to do a little discussion about Kant and his Critique of Pure Reason. This is the translation by Paul Geyer. Pretty good translation. I want to just discuss the entirety of the Copernican turn. In the preface to the second edition, he had two editions to the Critique of Pure Reason. Kritik der reinen Vernunft. My German is not great. It's getting better, but basically I think it's either for the first or the second edition, probably. It's in one of the prefaces where he makes a reference to Copernicus. Copernicus was if you didn't know, was the person who eventually got the Catholic doctrine of the world, or about everything revolving around the world, to the scientific understanding, the new scientific understanding of how everything revolves around the sun, and we're just merely one of the planets that revolves around the sun. And I guess what Kant does here is he makes a reference to Copernicus is because he is he's doing his own Copernican turn here, his own Copernican revolution. Because I want to just do a little bit of a discussion about the history of philosophy before Kant, before Kant's critical years. A lot in the pre-critical years of Kant, when he was a Privatdozent, or a teacher or a professor who got money based on how many people were in his classes. Basically, what this was, there was rationalism and there was empiricism. And rationalism was the field of philosophy which aimed to understand everything by chopping things up by logic, which is in a way the way that analytic philosophy is, trying to chop everything up through reason and logic. But that these people included people such as Mendelssohn and and people like that. I'm trying to think of others. People who wait, Mendelssohn was after Kant, but I don't know why I said that. But I'm thinking about people like it's the metaphysicians, like the Leibniz, the Malebranche, and others like that. Those are the rationalist people who are trying to basically chop everything up by logic, because And then the other side of it is the empiricism, which includes people like Locke and Hobbes and Hume and Berkeley. Now, what these people were basically doing is the empiricists were basically looking at things based upon the senses. And I'm just gonna I'm gonna come back to this. I'm gonna come back to the rationalists and the empiricists here in a bit. But I just want to discuss Kant's view of metaphysics and the basic thesis of this whole book, of the Kritik der reinen Vernunft, or the Critique of Pure Reason. Basically, what his idea of metaphysics was is that it's the study of the soul, God in the world. It's making claims about the soul or the self and God in the world, the rest of the world. And Kant's basic claim in this Critique of Pure Reason is that those things are unknowable to us. Those things are noumena. And I'm going to get into that further here. But metaphysics, I'm just going to read from the B preface, the metaphysics a wholly isolated speculative cognition of reason that elevates itself entirely above all instruction from experience, and that through mere concepts, not like mathematics, through the application of concepts to intuition, where reason is thus supposed to be its own pupil, has up to now been so favored by fate as to have been able to enter upon the secure course of a science, even though it is older than all other sciences, and would remain even if all others were swallowed up by an all-consuming barbarism. For in it, reason continuously gets stuck, even when it claims a priori insight, as it pretends, into those laws confirmed by the commonest experience. In metaphysics, we have to retrace our path countless times because we find that it does not lead where we want to go, and it is so far from reaching unanimity, and is as in the assertions of its adherents that is rather a battlefield, and indeed one that appears to be especially determined for testing one's powers in mock combat. On this battlefield, no combatant has ever gained the least bit of ground, nor has any been able to base any lasting possession on his victory. Hence, there is no doubt that now the procedure of metaphysics has been a mere groping, and what is the worst, a groping among mere concepts. So he's basically talking about the rationalists here, the metaphysicians of Leibniz and Malebranche, and Wolff and Spinoza, people like that. But most of the whole Leibniz, people like Leibniz. And he's talking about that, you're talking about, trying to be rational, trying to break things up by reason, but all you have is concepts, and you're not relying upon experience, and it's basically, what he's saying here is very awesome and very blatant, I think. It's mere groping, blind groping. It's just, where it's groping among mere concepts. And one thing he's going to say here is that, without, that if you have experience without concepts, then it's just useless, and that if you have concepts without experience, then you're empty. It's empty. It's worthless. And that's a big thing I want to think about here, is his idea of metaphysics, because this leads to his Copernican turn. I'm going to go forward about 200 pages here. I'm going to go to the part of the doctrine of the elements in chapter 3 on the ground of the distinction in if you're looking at version A or edition A. In this part, in the I'm starting here at almost by A249. Appearances, to the extent that as objects they are thought in accordance with the unity of the categories, are called phenomena. So the categories are bases of understanding. They're the ways that the things that we have in our mind that help us to understand things. And then there are things, most of those are a posteriori, but appearances, to the extent that as objects they are thought in accordance with the unity of the categories, they are called phenomena. If, however, I suppose there to be things that are merely objects of the understanding, and that nevertheless can be given to an intuition, although not sensible intuition, then such things would be called noumena. Now, one might have thought that the concept of appearance is limited by the transcendental aesthetic already yields by itself the objective reality of the noumena, and justifies the division of objects into phenomena and noumena, thus also the division of the world into a world of the senses and of the understanding. Indeed, in such a way that the difference here would not concern merely the logical form of the distinct cognition of one and the same thing, but rather the difference between how they can originally be given to our cognition, and in accordance with which they are in themselves different species. So he makes here the distinction between phenomena and noumena. Now he, has better. He has some more discussions on what those things are. Phenomena. This is a distinction between phenomena. What we're seeing, all this here, phenomena. And then there's noumena, which is the thing in itself, it's often referred to as the thing in itself, which is the object which is not knowable. And the phenomena he's saying is, this is the phenomena of the pen. That he's saying that the rationalist metaphysician is looking at this as it is through just rational concepts, is looking at this as if it is, just a being, totally, and how it is just a being that can only be a being which is outside of myself, and there's no real possibility outside of that. So it's basically a groping around of mere concepts, as he says in the preface. And the whole Copernican turn here, goes against this whole idea of the rationalism, because we're having a distinction which has not been around before, between phenomena and noumena, where there's a phenomena. When I look at this pen, I'm looking at probably at a phenomena of a pen, and not the thing in itself of the pen. There's probably a thing in itself somewhere behind or somewhere else, somewhere in relation to this phenomena. There's a noumena, or a thing in itself, which is the real pen that I am thus seeing. And what he's saying here is that the noumena, or the things in themselves, are what the rationalist metaphysicians are going after when they look at the soul and the God and the world. And that those things are not knowable, and we can't know those things. We cannot justify our knowledge in them, and therefore we should not think of them as they are. We should sort of not go at them the way the rationalist metaphysicians do, like Leibniz and all those. And basically, in this does not mean that he's saying that God doesn't exist, or that the world doesn't exist. He probably was one who did believe in God. He was just saying it was through a matter of rational belief. It was through rational belief. It was a belief that was through being smart about it, and not just beliefs being weird or whatever. It's through rational belief. Even though those things are not knowable, you can still have beliefs. So he was one who did have belief in God, but he said that the things that the rationalist metaphysicians tackle are things that are worthless to tackle in metaphysics, because those things are not knowable. So yeah, that's basically what this whole Copernican turn is here, is because before Kant, in the Critique of Pure Reason, there had never been this phenomena-noumena distinction before. Even with the Berkeley and Hume and Hobbes and Locke, Berkeley, even the idealist Berkeley, never had that. He was saying that the things you're seeing are probably ideas. And actually, when this book was first published in 1781, it was thought to be a Berkeleyan idealism, a idealism that was a following of Berkeley. And he got pissed at that. He's like, no, this is not what that is. And then people eventually got it, that this is a total difference. Just because of that one little distinction this little, distinction between phenomena and noumena, which whole changed the whole thing. This changed philosophy for ever since, before Kant, philosophy has not been the same since at all. But this whole turn just sort of changed everything. I mean, we wouldn't have phenomenology if it weren't for him. We wouldn't have, and I really cherish phenomenology, which is why I'm referring to that. And I really think that's a great thing. But I'm going to go into more things about this later, possibly about the next video. The next video I'll probably make on the critique of pure reason of Kant is probably the analytic synthetic and the a priori a posteriori thing and the intersection between those. So.